All right, so you've got Klaviyo installed, you're staring at this dashboard, and honestly, you're probably feeling a little overwhelmed right now because there's a lot going on over here. Here's the thing though, you're sitting on one of the most powerful marketing platforms that's ever been built for e-commerce, and most people are using maybe 10% of what Klaviyo can actually do. Over the last 5 years, I've spent well over 10,000 hours inside of this dashboard in Klaviyo, and I've used it to generate over $50 million for e-commerce brands just like yours. And today, my goal is simply to give you a good understanding of everything that you should be using Klaviyo for in 2025, and a step-by-step tutorial that you can follow to get your basics set up in your account so that you can start driving your customer acquisition costs down and driving more revenue from your email marketing starting today. All right, now before we dive into the platform, I just want to tell you why you made the right choice by installing Klaviyo in 2025. So first off, let me tell you something right off the bat. You didn't just install another email marketing platform, you installed what's basically going to become the operating system for your entire customer relationship strategy. So here's what I mean by that. I can guarantee that 90% of your competitors are still sending batch and blast emails and hoping that something sticks and drives revenue, but you now have access to Klaviyo, which is going to allow you to track every single interaction that a customer has with your brand and help you turn that into revenue. What I'm talking about is basically a system that knows when someone visits your website at 2 a.m., it remembers that they looked at a specific product, and it can automatically send them a perfectly timed email 3 days later with a personalized discount for that exact item. And believe it or not, this still blows my mind, but most people that use Klaviyo are literally just scratching the surface with what's possible. The brands that figure out how to use Klaviyo properly and optimally are literally seeing over 40% of their total revenue coming from email and SMS marketing. Not 40% of their marketing attributed revenue, 40% of all of their e-commerce revenue. All right, so with that said, let's dive into your dashboard because I want you to understand what you're really working with here. All right, so looking at the Klaviyo dashboard for the first time, I can definitely see how it can feel like you're piloting a rocket ship. There's numbers everywhere. There's arrows pointing up and down. I want to help you understand what's really going on here. So we're not going to start with the homepage. Believe it or not, I really don't spend too much time on the homepage. I want to show you the 4 main parts that exist within Klaviyo. So there's really 4 areas that we're going to be looking at that basically oversee your entire customer journey. So the first one's going to be sign up forms, which is what we're going to use to grow your list. The second is going to be your automated flows that basically trigger when someone signs up to your list and performs other actions. The third is going to be your campaigns, which are going to be manually sent whenever you have something to say, like a newsletter, a sale, new products, etc. And then the fourth is going to be our analytics section, where we're going to be able to look at the reporting within Klaviyo and understand what's actually working, what's not working, and look at the numbers, what they're telling us. So with that said, we're going to start with sign up forms. So when someone gets to your website, you need to have a pop-up form in place that is going to convert that website visitor into a new email and hopefully SMS subscriber as well. So what you're going to do is navigate over here to sign up forms. And within sign up forms, you're going to click on create form over here. So you're going to see that there's a lot of templates that you can choose from within Klaviyo. I have an entire video on how to set up your first pop-up form, so you can go watch that after this video. But right now, I just want to show you how to navigate around the platform. So this is where you'll be able to choose one of these sign up form templates, or you can create a blank form. So let's say we are going to create one of these forms. You would name it what you want to name it. And here's where you're going to choose your email subscriber list. So when you're first setting up Klaviyo, what you're going to do is you're going to navigate over to where it says lists and segments. I believe there's a default list called newsletter that's created for you when you sign up. But if there's not and you ever need to create a new list, you're going to see over here, it says create new. So you're going to click create new and then create list. So here we can call this new email list. Click create list. And then when we go back to sign up forms, you're going to be able to see if we go to create form, we go back to our template here. Here, you're going to be able to see the list that was just created. So lists in Klaviyo are going to be used to house new email subscribers. So every time someone subscribes to your list, you need a list for them to go into. You want to have one main email list where all of your new subscribers that sign up organically, which means either through a pop-up form, an embedded form, or checkout, all of those subscribers are going to go into one master email list. And then you want to have a master SMS list as well. The only other times you're going to need to create lists are basically when you have people signing up because of a specific event. So let's say you have people that are signing up for a giveaway you're running. You don't really want to treat those people and look at those people the same as people who are signing up organically through your pop-up form or at checkout. So a giveaway is a good example of where you'd want a specific different list. So we have our email list that people are going to be submitted into from our pop-up form over here, and then our SMS list over here. So you would do the same thing and create something And Klaviyo even tells you over here that they recommend having a separate list for phone numbers. So you would go ahead and do the same thing as we did with our new email list, create an SMS list, and then you can click create form over here. Now, again, I have another in-depth video that goes into a lot more detail into how to build out pop-up forms, but here is a good introduction to how you can build basically any creative in Klaviyo. So here we're in the form builder, and here we have three main sections. So we have the styles of our form, we have targeting and behavior, and then we have the ability to add other blocks. So when it comes to the style, you can either have a pop-up form, a full page form, you can have a flyout form that looks like this, or you could have an embedded form that's actually just going to be like embedded into a specific page on a website with specific embedded code. For this example, we can focus on a pop-up right now. So you would be able to change the size of this to whatever you'd like. You can have an image on the left. You could have no image. You could have an image on the right. So it is very flexible for you to build this on your own. If you're starting from template or if you're starting from scratch, this is how you do it. You can have your form on all devices or just have it trigger on desktop and then have a separate one on mobile. You can choose the background color of the form. You can have an image. You can choose if the position is going to be contained or covered, like we can see here. So there's a ton of options here in the form settings for you to play with so that you can get your form to look basically however way you want it to look. So we can see over here, this form has a micro yes step. I explain what a micro yes step is in a bunch of my other videos, but we can see clearly here, this is where Klaviyo has different steps in the form. So we want to guide people through these different steps instead of having everything on one step in the form. So what you're going to see here is you have your micro yes step over here. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to a regular form over here just so we can see everything. So here we have our micro yes step. Then once they click experience Sydney over here, they would go to your email opt-in. Then after they put their email in and opt in, they would go to the SMS opt-in. And then basically you have the ability to create new steps. So if you want to collect personal information from someone, if you want to have a completely blank step, you'd be able to do that over here. And you can use the blocks and you can use the styling to make this look like whatever you want to look like. If you want to add blocks over here, let's say we want to put some text in, we can add some text in over here to explain what we want to say on this part of the form. We can then put in a button so that someone can actually go and enter their. Okay, so starting with our sign up forms section. Our sign up forms are what are going to be used to start collecting new email subscribers. Now, before we go into how to actually build a form and what the form builder looks like, in order to collect new subscribers, we need a list to be set up. So by default, you'll probably see that there are already a few lists in your account when you actually create your Klaviyo account. But if you ever need to create a new list, you can go over to lists and segments right over here, click on create new, click create new list. And here I can say something like master email list. Now we're going to want one master list for email and one master list for SMS. Everyone who is signing up to hear from you organically via a pop-up form or at checkout, you want to go into this one master email list and this one SMS list. Other reason you might want some other lists are for when people are signing up to hear from you for different reasons. So let's say you're running a giveaway, for example, you might want to have everyone signing up for that giveaway go into a different list because fundamentally they're signing up for a different reason and you want to treat them differently within Klaviyo. So once you have your master email and your master SMS list set up, you can go back to sign up forms and we can just click create form over here. And what you're going to see here is there are a bunch of templates that can be used to create a form, or you can actually create a blank form from scratch. So let's say we use this one as an example. You can really choose anyone that's speaking to you. I'm just going to go, we can keep the name the same, for example, here. And then I'm just going to type in master email list here. So we have the list that we just created. And then we can click create form over here. Now, I have an entire other video where I go in depth in how to build out a high converting pop-up form. So go watch that after this video to actually build out your form and learn about everything that exists inside of the form builder. But right now, just at a high level, so you can see how Klaviyo works, the main thing to understand about our form builder is we need to make sure that number one, we have a email input field. So if you're creating a form from scratch, let's say, you would go to add blocks and you want to make sure you have an email input in there. Now, once we're collecting someone's email, we need a button to actually get them onto our list. So we can see here when I click on this button, you can see that Klaviyo is asking what action do we want this button to perform. So the action is going to be submit form, and that's going to then put them onto a list. So in the next step right below, you can see it's now asking what list do we want to submit them to. And here it's saying master email list, which is what I just chose in the previous section. And then it's asking us, what do we want to do after the form submits? So we can either close the form or we can go to show next step. So typically you would want to ask for someone's email first and then their phone number on another step. So in the form builder right here, if we want to add a phone number step, you'll see I can click add step. I can click SMS opt-in. I can do smart opt-in or traditional, let's say. We're going to choose the list that we want to put people into. So this would be our SMS subscribers list, for example. And then when I click add step, you're going to see that it generates the SMS opt-in page for me. So you can change any of this text using the editor over here. And then again, we have our phone number input. So Klaviyo has this built out so that it's doing this compliantly and properly. And then we have our sign up button over here where again, we just need to make sure the action, the list, and the after submit options are set up properly. So at a high level, this is how you set up your first pop-up form and start getting email and SMS subscribers onto your list. Now, once you have subscribers that are making it onto your list, the next thing we need to look at are your flows. So there are 7 core flows that every single e-commerce brand needs. And I have a very in-depth video where I go into all of the details about how to create those flows. But right now, I'm just going to show you how we actually go about creating flows and how we get people from one step in the customer journey to the next. So like I said, now we have people signing up to our list. We're going to navigate now over to our flows section over here. And here is where we're going to click on create flow. Now, Klaviyo is giving me a bunch of options and showing me a bunch of different flows over here that I can kind of create with a template approach, or you can actually click build your own. For the sake of understanding how Klaviyo works, let's go ahead and click build your own over here so that you can learn exactly how flows work. So as soon as someone signs up to your list, you need to have a welcome series or a nurture series in place in order to start educating them on your brand and nurturing them into their first conversion. So I'm going to go ahead and type in welcome series over here. We don't need any tags, and I'm going to click create manually. Now, this is what Klaviyo's flow builder looks like at a high level. The first thing that we need is a trigger. So every flow, every automation is triggered by a specific action or behavior. So coming from your pop-up form where someone just signed up to your list, the trigger that we're going to use for our welcome series is going to be the added to list trigger right here. So we're going to say someone has been added to a list, and then we need to choose which list is going to trigger this flow. So let's go ahead and choose the master email list, which is the one that we used in the pop-up form. So it's super important that you're choosing the right list that's going to trigger your welcome series. But like I said, if we just have one master list, that makes everything way easier. So we chose add to list, we chose our master list, and then you're going to see it says profile filters over here. So what profile filters do is in a flow, you can basically choose at the flow level, who do we not want to receive emails from this flow? So what profile filters allow us to do is basically choose at the flow level. So not at the specific email level, which we'll see in a second. At the flow level, we can decide who do we want to receive these emails and who do we not want to receive these emails. So for our welcome and nurture series, for example, we only want people to be nurtured up until the point that they place their first order. So that means that after someone places their first order, we don't want them to get these emails in our welcome series anymore. And this is something that you should keep in mind as you're building out all of your flows in just thinking of at what point do we want to remove someone from receiving these emails anymore. So as an example here, I can say add profile filter. And here's where we get our first look at choosing conditions within Klaviyo. So Klaviyo lets you choose these conditions in both flows and segments, which we'll see in a few minutes. Right here in the flow section, what I can say is what has someone done or not done? And this is going to unlock all of the behaviors that people are taking within our Klaviyo account. So if you're on Shopify or BigCommerce or another platform, the action of placing an order is just going to be called placed order, like we see right here. And then we have the ability to choose a time frame. So we're going to say that someone has placed an order 0 times in this example since starting this flow. So this is just a really cool feature of Klaviyo where every time an email is about to be sent, they're going to check, has someone performed this action from the time that they entered the flow. So the trigger is them signing up to the list. So I'm going to click save again here, confirm and save. And now we're gonna have our welcome series where we can see the trigger is someone being added to the list. The profile filter is placed order 0 times since starting this flow. Now the next thing that's going to be here are our action. Now the three main things that we have to understand when it comes to flows are we have actions. So we have things that are going to happen automatically within this automation. We have the timing of when we want things to happen. And then we have logic where we could say, if this happens, then set the time delay to this. Or if this happens, then set a time delay to something else. Or if this happens, then send an email or an SMS. You get the point. So for a welcome series, we would typically want the first email to be sent right away as an example. And here's where you can see Klaviyo is a really simple drag and drop editor where we can just drag the email into this section over here. And when you click on the email, you're gonna see a bunch of fields over here. So at a high level, we have our email name. So you can call this welcome series email number 1. And it is important to name your emails with a specific naming convention because when you're looking at the reporting data, it'll make it way easier to understand which emails are coming from which flows. So we have welcome series email number 1. Then we have the subject line of the email. We have the preview text of the email. And then we have the sender name and the sender email address. So the sender email address has to be coming from your domain, and the sender name can basically be whatever you want. So if you want to use your name as a founder, if you want to use the brand name, that's what you could do. So here where it says template and select template, this is where the actual email gets built. So here's where you can see Klaviyo has some decent templates that are built out. What you really want to be doing though is designing your emails in a platform like Figma, just because it allows for way more flexibility and allows you to get really beautiful premium designs that look like this. And then you would build those out in Klaviyo. I have another video on how to design high converting emails. So go watch that if you haven't already. And that'll give you a guide on how to actually design emails properly and then build them out in Klaviyo when you're ready. But if you're just a beginner and you're not ready to use Figma yet, then you can definitely use these Klaviyo templates. So just as an example, I would choose one here. We can click use template. And here's where you would basically just go in, edit all of the copy, edit all of the design for your brand. And this is our first introduction to the Klaviyo editor when it comes to actually designing emails. So if you've used any drag and drop editor before, it's basically the same thing, but you can see what we can have here is we can just drag in text anywhere we want it. Then you can obviously style your text however you want. You can drag in an image wherever you want it and select an image from your computer. You have a split block, which basically just allows you to have 2 columns of content. You have buttons, which you have buttons, which you're gonna wanna use for your call to actions. There's a header bar that you can drag in, which would basically have your logo, and then you can actually add other links as well. And then you have other things that are less impactful like drop shadows, dividers, social links, spacers, product. I'll touch on product here actually, because this is a really just important one and really valuable one when it comes to Klaviyo. So what you're gonna do here is anytime you want to show products, this is one of the things that really makes Klaviyo shine over other platforms when it comes to email for e-commerce. So over here in the product section, we can see that we can either set this up to be dynamic or static. So as an example, if I did choose static, it would allow me to go in and basically just select specific products over here. So let's say I just chose these 4 products. It would then bring in the products that I wanted, and I could then go and change the product name. I could change the price. I can even choose if I want to show the price or the name. And basically like this is fully customizable, flexible. So static is a good option to use when you know exactly what you want to be featuring. Now dynamic is very cool when it comes to flows because Klaviyo is plugged directly into your Shopify product feed, which means that in a welcome series, let's say, if you have a lot of inventory that's turning over consistently, you're not gonna wanna choose a list of 5 or 10 static bestsellers if those bestsellers are changing all of the time. So what you could do instead is we could basically create a new product feed right here and call that bestsellers, no spaces allowed. And then what we can do is say best-selling products over the last 3 or 90 days. And now let's say we choose 3 days. We could even include other filters if we wanted to. So let's say we only want to show products where the price is at least $10. We can create this product feed over here. And now what's gonna happen is dynamically every single second of every day, Klaviyo is checking when it's sending each individual email on what the best-selling products are over the last 3 days. So that's always showing the bestsellers at any given moment. Now, what Klaviyo allows you to do is you can click preview and test within the editor, and this will show you a good idea of what the email is going to look like in your customers' inboxes. So here you can see a bunch of the elements that I dragged in, the button, the 2 columns, the text, etc. And here's where you can see our dynamic bestsellers that are being pulled in. And just to show you another example of what you can do with a product feed, let's say we wanted each specific person to see products that they were already looking at on the site. What we can do is call this recently viewed as an example. And instead of showing best sellers or most viewed products, you can personalize this for each customer to show products that a customer has recently viewed, show products that a customer has added to cart, or even show products that a customer might also like based on other products that they've previously purchased or interacted with. So for our recently viewed over here, I'm going to click products a customer has recently viewed. If the customer has limited history, so it's our welcome series, maybe they just signed up, they haven't viewed any, we can choose a fallback and say our newest products, most viewed products, best selling products as an example. And again, if we want to add filters, we could do that. And now I'll click create product feed. And here's an example of that dynamic content at play here. So here you can see, I'm currently previewing this as elliottkovac@gmail.com, my email address, and you can see the products that it's showing me right here. All right, so that's how to actually build an email inside of Klaviyo. And the builder looks exactly the same between email campaigns and email flows. So now we have our subject line preview text, our actual email that's over here. And then you have some settings on every flow email. So here it's asking, do we want to skip recently emailed profiles? So what this setting is going to do is it's going to basically say, if someone received another email within the last 16 hours, it could have been a campaign or it could have been a flow. Do we want them to receive this email as well? So if this is ticked, that means that if someone received another email within the last 16 hours, they're going to be skipped and not receive this email. Typically, it's okay to have this on in some flows, but in the majority of flows, the truth is, like if we want someone to get a specific email at a specific point in time along that customer journey, then we don't want them to be skipped. So a perfect example to highlight this is if you send a campaign to someone, they go to your website, they add a product to cart, and then they go into your abandoned cart flow. Like, yes, they received an email in the last 16 hours, but of course we want them to receive this abandoned cart email because that's kind of the whole point of the abandoned cart email. Get someone back with another touch point quickly after the last one. And then you have UTM tracking over here. So if you're using Google Analytics or another third-party reporting tool, then you definitely want to have UTMs get added to all of your links so that you can be able to track performance outside of Klaviyo. And then if you ever want to add an additional filter on one specific email, so we had our flow filter over here that basically said, don't send to someone if they've placed an order since starting this flow. Hypothetically, if you wanted a specific filter on just one email, so it doesn't apply the whole flow, just one email, you could do the same thing and add a filter to that one email over here. Now, this is a perfect time to introduce time delays. So within flows, you have the ability to set a time delay between actions. So we sent our first email right away after someone signed up, and now there's going to be a time delay in place. So we can set this to 1 day. And what this means is Klaviyo is going to wait 24 hours after this email has been sent before it performs the next action. So the next action might be another email. And to show you how conditional split logic works, we can put a conditional split here where we can say after 1 day, if someone has performed a specific action, then do this next thing. So as an example, what a lot of brands do is if someone doesn't open the first welcome email in their welcome series, they'll resend it again. So here you can see how a conditional split works. I can say what someone has done to unlock the behaviors. And then I can say, so what I can do is say opened email 0 times since starting this flow. And then what I can do is I can add a filter over here. So you can add filters to almost any behavioral properties within Klaviyo. And then I can say where the specific email that I want to reference, email number 1 over here, we're going to see as message over here. And then I'm going to be able to choose email number 1 as an example. So now I'm saying if someone has opened email number 1 0 times since starting this flow, I can click save. Then if that is true, then I want to resend them that same email. So I can clone that email right over here, and I can bring that over here in the yes branch. So they've opened 0 emails, let's send it again. And then if the answer is no on this conditional split, meaning they have opened email number 1, then what I can do is drag in our email number 2. So this says email number 3 over here because we already have a second one, but this will be email number 2. And that is how flow building at the core level works within Klaviyo. And then FYI, SMS works the exact same way. So you would drag in an SMS, you have the same settings essentially here, content you would edit. And then you have your SMS content right over here. You also want to make sure Klaviyo helps you out with compliance settings. So really important to be SMS compliant. And basically you just want to make sure that these are all checked. All right, so now that you understand how to build a flow at a core level, I'm going to show you just how to build the other ones you need really quickly. So the other flows you need are an abandoned checkout flow. So if I click on view all flows over here, I'm just going to search for checkout over here. So Klaviyo actually calls this an abandoned cart flow. And this is really important to understand because there are two types of behaviors that someone can take on your store. So what I'm going to do quickly is I want to show you the metrics tab over here. And the definition of metrics is basically behaviors that people can take. So you can see that people can be active on site. They can add something to cart. They could have an email that bounces. They could have an order that cancels, etc. These are all the different behaviors. Now, what's really important to understand is there's a checkout started metric, which is going to be triggered when someone starts a checkout on your store. But then there's also an added to cart metric. And this by default isn't set up on some accounts. If you have Shopify and you go to the integrations, you're going to want to make sure that you have the integration set up properly. And with the newest update to the integration, you can actually see here, there's new tracking features that have been added. I think one of those is the added to cart metric. So if you go ahead and get started with these additional tracking features, you might see the added to cart metric as a Shopify add to cart metric, where over here, you can see that our added to cart metric is a custom one, which is how it's always been done. But now in 2025, I do believe that this is coming through Shopify as well. So last thing I'll say on metrics is you can have metrics that are just default from Klaviyo. So anything that's a Klaviyo metric is going to be related to emails and SMS for the most part. And then you also have metrics coming from Shopify that are related to ordering and other behaviors pre-purchase. And then you can have other metrics that are triggered through an API, through other integrations, other apps, or you can have custom ones that you even set up on your own if you have any behaviors on your website that are completely custom. So if we navigate back to flows over here, the important thing to understand is that Klaviyo calls an abandoned checkout flow an abandoned cart flow. So what that means is if we click on abandoned cart reminder here, when you're setting up your abandoned cart and abandoned checkout flows, you actually should use the default templates of the flows from Klaviyo, and you shouldn't do it from scratch because of what I'm about to show you. So here, before we actually create the flow and click use template, just so you can see, Klaviyo calls this the abandoned cart reminder, but you can see right here, the trigger metric is checkout started. It's not added to cart. So what you're going to do is you're going to change the name from abandoned cart to abandoned checkout. And we can click use template. So this is the templated flow that Klaviyo has. There's a lot that you would want to customize for your brand specifically. And definitely feel free to go watch my in-depth video on flows after this so that you can build out your flows properly to optimize for conversions. Now, the reason why you want to be using the template is because if we click into our abandoned checkout email over here and we click on edit within the flow, here is where we can see the value that Klaviyo is providing in this template. So this table that we see right here is dynamic based on what your customer added into their cart and started their checkout with. So right here, instead of you having to do the work to set this up technically, this is already going to be working based on the Shopify integration and Klaviyo's template. And you'll be able to see over here, if I click preview and test, here's where I can see the specific products that someone added into their cart and started checkout with. And here's where we can see if I'm scrolling through different people and previewing as different customers who started checkouts, we can see the different products populating over here. So that's your abandoned checkout flow. And then the next thing you want to do based on what we talked about with abandoned checkout versus abandoned cart, you'd want to go ahead and simply clone your abandoned checkout flow. So if we look at the flow that I just created today, right now, you could simply clone this. I'm going to click clone over here. We can change the name to abandoned cart. And then you're going to change this to added to cart. So you're going to change the trigger to be the add to cart trigger, not the checkout started trigger. And then click clone. So you can clone any flow at any time and simply change the trigger. It's that simple. The last flow that you're going to want to have in place is a post-purchase flow. So you can see that Klaviyo has the essentials template, post-purchase follow-up. This is probably going to be good for your brand, although you'll want to customize it for your specific customer journey. And right over here, you can see the trigger for the flow is someone placing an order. They have conditional splits to see, was it someone's first order of all time, in which case they're going to be a new customer and you can tweak the template to have copy that speaks to that. Was it their second order over all time? Yes, then they're going to be a second time customer. And then if someone makes it to this part of the waterfall, you call it, so it's not their first order, it's not their second order, that must mean that they've placed at least 3 orders over all time. Then that means that they're going to be a loyal customer and we would want to talk to them as a loyal customer. Now, strategy-wise, this is completely different for every single brand. At my agency, Dispatch, we don't use this template at all. But for a new brand starting, just to get your flow set up, this is good. All right, so that's how to set up your first 4 core flows. Everyone must have them. The other flows that you're gonna wanna set up are your browse abandonment flow, your customer win-back flow, your sunset flow to keep your list healthy. I go through all those in detail in my other video that goes deep into the 7 core flows that you need. All right, so once we have our automations set up, the next thing we have to understand is campaigns. So we're going to want to send campaigns consistently. So you're gonna have your campaigns over here, and this as a dashboard view is gonna show you the campaigns that you've already sent or scheduled. It's gonna show you the time that they were updated. It's gonna show you the open rates, the click rates, and how much revenue was driven from those campaigns. So you'll be able to see at a glance which campaigns drove revenue, which ones didn't, and be able to optimize from there. So how do you actually create a campaign in Klaviyo? Great question. So you're gonna click on this create campaign button right over here. You're gonna name your email campaign. You're gonna choose the date that you wanna send the campaign. You're gonna choose whether it's an email or an SMS campaign, and then you're gonna choose any tags that you might wanna use. Next, you can click continue, and here's where we're gonna choose our segment or our list for the campaign. Now, you basically never want to send to your list of subscribers. You always want to be sending to an engaged segment. So I go through this in more detail in another video, but at a high level, what you're going to want to do is have at least one engaged segment set up. So this is a good opportunity for us to go over to the segments tab. So you can go ahead and click on lists and segments over here. And then same as we did before, you're gonna click on create new. And now instead of creating a list this time, we're gonna click create segment. And here we can set up our basic engaged 90 days segment. So just so you understand how segments work, similarly to what we saw in flows, we have all of our conditions around what someone has done, what someone hasn't done, what properties we've associated with their profile. We have the proximity to a specific location. We have the ability to define if they can actually receive marketing or not, as in, are they subscribed, are they unsubscribed? We can see if someone's in the EU, or we can even use predictive analytics about someone. So Klaviyo has this new feature in 2025 where you can actually describe a segment in your own words. So if I wanted to do this, I could say something like opened or clicked an email in the last 90 days. So Klaviyo is going to generate this for me right now. And you can see right away, it generated it. Super simple. Open an email at least once in the last 90 days, or clicked an email at least once in the last 90 days. And then what Klaviyo will do is they'll show you a preview of how many people are in this segment. And then just to show you an example without using the AI feature, if you want to do something more custom, let's say I want to also say, or this person has been on the website in the last 7 days. What I can do is click what someone has done or not done. Right away, the first thing that comes up, just because of alphabetical order, is active on site. And I can say active on site at least once. These are the other options that we have access to, but I'm going to say at least once. And then again here, we can say in the last, after a certain date. We can say between specific dates. We can say over all time. Here I'll say in the last 7 days. And then I'm gonna go ahead and click create segment. And now as soon as this segment is created, we can now use this segment to send a campaign to. Now the segment builder is actually another great reason why Klaviyo is so superior when it comes to ecom, because something I can also say is like, let's say we want to send a new campaign for a new product that's launching in a specific category. What we could define in our segment is we could say, and anyone else who has bought a product in the collection that we have this new product launching in, or has viewed a product in the last 30 days that's in this collection and might be interested in this specific thing, or has bought another product from a similar collection a few times. So we can really get deep into the e-commerce Shopify data over here to understand what someone has done in their order behavior to be able to target them very specifically. And the way that we would do that is we could say something like placed order or ordered product. So I could say order product over here, and then this is where we would want to use our filter. So I could say order product at least once in the last 30 days. where the collection includes any of, and then it's going to give us the list of all of the different collections that it's pulling from our Shopify store. So going back to our campaign builder here, we just built that new segment, engaged 90 days. Now you can see it's pulling up right over here. It's showing us the estimated recipients that the campaign is going to go to. We have a don't send to option as well. So if we want to exclude anyone, let's say we want to exclude anyone who's placed an order in the last 7 days, you would go ahead and create the segment for that and then just drop it in here. You have smart sending as an option. So similar to what we saw in flows, do we want someone who received an email in the last 16 hours to also receive this one, or do we want them to be skipped? That's where we would choose this over here. Then we have tracking. So again, if you want to use UTM parameters to be able to track outside of Klaviyo, you would select on. Then we're going to click next over here. And here, similar to what we just saw in flows, is where we have all of our campaign templates. So you either have saved templates from templates that have been built previously, or you can go ahead and again, choose any of these from Klaviyo. So you can go ahead and choose a template. The builder here is exactly what we looked at in flows. You would click next once you have your email that's created. Then you have your subject line, you have your preview text, you have the sender name, sender email. We can click next. So I'm just gonna put in test over here and test over here. Now, the next thing you're gonna see is you have the ability to add a follow-up email as well if you want to. This isn't always recommended, but let's say you're sending an email for a new product and you wanna make sure that people who didn't open it are getting another chance to. You could use this feature right here. And then here, it's gonna show you a high-level overview of the campaign before you schedule. So you can see here, the segment that we just created is still updating. So that's why we're getting this little message over here. Other than that, it's showing you just a recap. So we have smart sending on, we have our subject line to review text, we have the content of the email that is now put in, we have our from and reply settings filled out, we have an unsubscribe link in the email, which is required, and we have our UTM parameters on for tracking. So once all of this is done and we're happy with the content of the email, we're happy with all the settings over here, we can now click schedule or send. And here's where we have two options. We can either send the campaign right now, in which case we would click send now, or we can schedule the campaign for a future date. And within this, we have 3 options. So what we can do is send at a specific time. So if we have a promotion that's launching at midnight, let's say on the 20th, what we could do is say, we want to send this on the 20th at midnight specifically. And time zone, if it's launching at midnight EST, let's say, we could choose EST time zone or a different time zone. Or what we could do is we could choose a different day. And we could actually say we want to send this campaign at, and we can say we want to send this campaign at 9 a.m. and we actually want to send it in recipient's local time zone. So Klaviyo, primarily based on the IP address of people who are browsing your website, understands where people are in the world. And that allows us to use this feature, recipient's local time, where we're sending it to them at 9 a.m. in their time zone. And then you would just click schedule campaign over here and it would be off. Now, the 2 other options we have here in terms of send time is you can run a smart send time, is you can use smart send time. And basically what this is going to do is Klaviyo is going to send the campaign over 24 hours starting on this date. So starting at, let's just say 9 a.m. on June 22nd, it would then send it gradually over 24 hours. And it's telling you this is going to be an exploratory send, which basically means that they're using this as an opportunity to understand over the course of 24 hours, when are your open rates the highest? Because every single brand is gonna have a different customer demo, which is gonna make up a different customer list. And that means that some brands might have people who are most engaged in email at 9 a.m. And for other brands, that might be 2 p.m. So this is gonna allow you to figure that out. And then moving forward, after the exploratory send is done, you'll be able to send at that time consistently. And the final option here is a gradual send over several hours. So you can see that Klaviyo is going to send your message to a selected percentage of your recipients over time. So basically here we can say we want 20% of our list to get it per hour, which means our full segment is going to get the list over the course of 5 hours. And then finally, once we're set with our settings over here, you can click schedule campaign and this will be scheduled and you're all done. Now, if you're currently thinking to yourself, okay, now I know how to send a campaign, what campaigns should I send to actually drive revenue? Go watch my more in-depth video on how to put together a perfect campaign calendar for your brand. All right, so we've looked at sign-up forms to grow your list. We looked at flows to have your automations in place to drive your first conversions. We looked at now campaigns. What I wanna show you next is how to look at the reporting behind the scenes of all of these things so that you understand if your campaigns and your flows and your forms are actually working. Because one of the biggest benefits of Klaviyo is all of the data that it gives you on the performance of all of your marketing. So there's basically two ways you can look at your analytics. The first way is within each of these individual tabs. So for campaigns, as an example, you can click into each individual campaign and you'll be able to see, for campaigns as an example, you can see the open rate, you can see the click rate, and then you can see how much revenue a campaign drove. You also have important deliverability information. So deliverability is more important than ever. And here's where you can see how many emails were sent, what was the deliverability rate, what was your bounce rate, spam complaint rate, unsubscribe rate. So this is this individual campaign's data. We can also see recipient activity here. So we can see how many emails were scheduled, how many were delivered, how many of those emails got opened, and who opened these emails. We can see who clicked on our emails. We can see which emails bounced, where the unsubscribes came from. We can see if there were people that were skipped, why were they skipped. So here we can see there were 66 people skipped. 55 of those were from Smart Send, our option that we turned on. 4 of those were skipped because it was an invalid email address, and then 7 were skipped because Klaviyo flagged them as having suspicious emails. Next, we have our audience breakdown. So in our audience breakdown, if we're sending to different segments, you can see the results and the analytics for each of those segments here. Next, you have your link activity. So you have the overview of how many people actually clicked on links, how many people didn't. And then this is a great thing to monitor in your campaigns where you have different links for different sections and different CTAs. You can see which links specifically people clicked on. You can see the conversions that came from this campaign. So let's say we're looking at the placed order metric. I can group this by item over here. And here's where we can see exactly what products were purchased from this campaign. You can also group this by collections and see the same data here. So as you can see, there's a ton of data behind the scenes for each individual campaign, and the same exact thing relates to flows. So if we go back to the welcome series we created before, what you'll see here is a button that says show analytics up here. And here's where, similar to how you can see the campaign level data, for flows, inside of the flow, you can see what was the open rate, the click rate, and the purchases, the placed order rate for each individual email, how many emails were sent, how many are in the waiting phase, how many were skipped. And this will give you a good quick overview when you're looking at your flows to understand which emails are converting, which emails need help, and help you analyze the situation at a glance. And then just like we looked at for campaigns, if you want to go deeper and understand more data about one specific email within a flow, you can click on that email. You can click on view details next to performance. And here's where you can see, you can select the date range. So over the last 30 days, let's say, we'll be able to see our open rate, click rate, placed order, our deliverability metrics, and everything else that we just looked at for campaigns within each of these flow emails as well. So that's how to look at the individual email data. And then the other view that you're going to want to use is the business review dashboard inside of dashboards. So if you click on analytics, you click on dashboards, and then you click on business review, here's where we're going to be able to see our total revenue from Shopify, how much of that revenue is attributed. So here's where we have our overview dashboard where we can see all of our high level metrics and understand how performance is trending. So in the growth overview, we have our conversion summary where we can see total revenue from Shopify. We can see attributed revenue that's coming from Klaviyo. And then we can see the percentage of total revenue that's coming from Klaviyo. And at a glance, we can see, is this up or is this down? Are we driving more revenue than the previous period? Or are we driving less revenue from Klaviyo? So the next tab we have here is our message type breakdown. So we have all of our attributed revenue that's coming from Klaviyo right here. And then we can see how much revenue is coming from campaigns and how much revenue is coming from flows. And then the percentage that's coming from each. And if we're trending up period over period or down period over period. And you can select the time period you want to be looking at and the comparison period. So period over period, year over year, or a custom different period right up here at the top. Then finally, you have your channel breakdown where you're going to be able to see how much revenue is coming from email and how much is coming from SMS, and then the trend. Now, next up, you have your campaign performance summary. So you're going to be able to see at a high level revenue and recipients. Then you're going to have your metrics. So here is the high level metrics that you should be looking at every single month. You have your recipients, your unique opens, your open rate, your unique clicks, your click rate, your unique conversions or placed orders, your conversion rate, your conversion value, which is revenue. Then you have your revenue per recipient and your average order value. And then you have those broken out by email and SMS. These are at a high level all of the metrics you want to be optimizing for every single month. And then quickly at a glance for the period that you're looking at, you're gonna be able to see your top performing campaigns. Then for flows, you have the exact same metrics over here. So these are the high level metrics aggregated across all of your flows that you're going to want to monitor every single month and make sure you're optimizing for. And then again, you're gonna be able to see your top performing flows at a glance right here. Then you're gonna be able to see your deliverability at a glance, your industry benchmarks. So are you doing well? Are you not doing well compared to other companies in your industry? And then finally, you have a segment growth summary. Honestly, kudos to Klaviyo because this is really a great business review dashboard that is a great overview for most brands to be looking at every month. Now, while we're in analytics, the other things you can have here are your experiments. So any A/B tests, which I didn't get into today because it's a little higher level, are going to be listed over here. So this is where your A/B test results will live across your campaigns and your flows. On the metric side, we talked about all the metrics you have. Benchmarks, I wouldn't pay too much attention to, but it is good to reference to understand where you're doing well, where you're not doing well compared to competitors. All right, so that wraps up the high level Klaviyo tutorial. Now here is what I want you to do right now. First off, hit that subscribe button because I'm releasing new videos on email and SMS marketing for Klaviyo every single week, and you don't want to miss the advanced strategies that are coming next. Second, I covered the Klaviyo basics at a high level in this video so that you understand the platform, but now it's time for you to actually build everything out. So I want you to go check out this video on how to build out all of the core flows that you need for your brand with strategy that's actually specific to your brand so that you can start driving way more revenue today. Now, here's the important part. I don't want you to just watch this video and all my other videos. I actually want you to implement what you learn. The difference between brands that succeed with Klaviyo and brands that struggle isn't the features that they have access to. It's whether they actually use them. The good news for you is that your competitors are probably still using Klaviyo like it's 2020. And because you're watching this video, you have the opportunity to not be like them and actually become masters of this platform that allow you to speak to your customers at a much deeper level and build relationships with them that your competitors are not. After driving over $50 million in e-commerce revenue for our brand partners and our clients, the truth is email and SMS marketing and Klaviyo can work for everyone to drive a significant amount of your revenue, drive your customer acquisition costs down, and drive your LTV up. It's really just about sticking with it, figuring out what works for your brand, and continuing to optimize every single month. So with that said, I'll see you in the next video.